When fans talk about the scariest Buffy the Vampire Slayer villain, the conversation usually drifts to the Master, the Gentleman, or perhaps even Dark Willow. However, none of those legendary foes have stayed with me quite like the villain at the heart of one seemingly standalone episode in Season 2. The monster in question wasn't a centuries-old vampire or a spell-casting hellspawn. It was something, and someone, much closer to reality, and that's what makes it so disturbing. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was known for using supernatural metaphors to explore real-life traumas, but in this case, it came wrapped in a terrifyingly human disguise with no otherworldly influence to be found. The Season 2 Buffy episode that still haunts me drops right into the middle of Buffy's high school life and features a villain who feels deeply out of place in Sunnydale's usual lineup of demons and devils. There's no Hellmouth, no ancient prophecy, and no ritual sacrifice, just a guy who inserts himself into Buffy's life in the most unsettling way possible. On a show famous for inventive villains, this one grounded his horror in the all-too-familiar. That's why he still gives me nightmares, and why he's the scariest Buffy villain despite having little in common with the rest of the terrifying roster of foes faced by the Slayer. Buffy's scariest monster was an abusive robot boyfriend. Buffy meets the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing, and he's got a motherboard. The scariest Buffy villain came in Season 2, Episode 11, Ted. Ted initially plays like a quirky detour from Buffy the Vampire Slayer's ongoing plot. Buffy's still dealing with Angel, the looming vampire threat, and the constant juggling act of being both a teenager and a slayer. Things take a turn for the unusual when Joyce, Buffy's mom, introduces Buffy to someone new, Joyce's seemingly perfect new boyfriend, Ted. Played to perfection by John Ritter, he's charming, friendly, a great cook, and everyone loved him. Everyone, that is, except Buffy. From the moment he's introduced in his Buffy Season 2 episode, Ted feels off. He insists on traditional rules, calls Buffy young lady like he's her dad, and invades her personal space with forced authority. Despite this, everyone around Buffy is charmed by him, even Giles and Willow. The more Ted pushes boundaries as the episode rolls on, the more isolated Buffy becomes. When she pushes back, literally, she accidentally kills H, or so she thinks. In one of Buffy the Vampire Slayer's most shocking turns, Ted turns out to be a robot. Not just any robot, either, he was built by a deeply disturbed man, also named Ted Buchanan and played by John Ritter, who wanted to preserve the illusion of a perfect domestic life. After the real Ted died, the robot version continued his mission: find women, force them into 1950s-style roles, and eliminate anything that disrupted the illusion, including teenage daughters who didn't obey. The horror of Ted isn't that Buffy faces off against a killer robot. It's that the robot is terrifying because he acts like a controlling, abusive stepfather, right down to the fake charm, creepy moral superiority, and terrifying temper. It's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer monster episode that doesn't feel like one. That contrast is exactly what earns Ted the title of scariest Buffy villain in my book. Why Ted was more terrifying than any Buffy monster. Ted didn't need fangs or magic to be the scariest Buffy villain, just charm, control, and cold-blooded abuse. John Ritter as Ted with his robotic face exposed in Buffy. The monsters on Buffy the Vampire Slayer are usually easy to categorize. Vampires bite, demons summon hellfire, and evil witches chant in Latin before doing something unspeakable. But Ted? He weaponizes charisma. He doesn't just threaten Buffy physically, he destabilizes her reality. She knows something is wrong, but no one believes her because Ted is the kind of villain who manipulates perception. What makes Ted uniquely terrifying is how real he feels. Unlike the average demon of the week, Ted reflects real-world abuse in disturbingly familiar ways. He's not just a stepfather figure, he's the controlling, gaslighting adult that far too many children have dealt with in silence. The kind who smiles in front of others and turns cruel behind closed doors. To make matters worse, when Buffy finally fights back, she's treated like she's the threat. It's not until the truth comes apart at the seams that anyone realizes she was right all along. Ted's menace is elevated by the fact that he wasn't built by a global demon cult or hell god. He was created by a man, just a regular guy, an inventor with issues and a delusional sense of morality. That's where the true horror lies. He's not born of dark magic or ancient evil. Ted is the byproduct of entitlement, rage, and a twisted sense of domestic perfection. The robot's programming reflects that ugly ideology, enforcing rules that sound eerily like what some real-life abusers preach. Even the design of Ted's lair, complete with the creepy shrine to his past victims, grounds the horror in reality. Ted feels like a true crime story that just so happens to involve circuits and gears. The genre shift only adds to how disorienting the episode feels. Buffy fans expect gory monsters and gothic castles, but Ted gives us a sunny kitchen, home-baked cookies, and a smile that hides something much darker. This is why Ted is, in my opinion, the scariest Buffy villain. He may be metal on the inside, but his horror is all too human. In a show full of demons, he's the one who felt most likely to knock on your front door. Ted proved Buffy should have ventured into sci-fi more. Ted showed that Buffy's scariest stories didn't need demons. A close-up of Ted dead with his robotic face exposed in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. While Buffy the Vampire Slayer was first and foremost a supernatural show, it occasionally flirted with science fiction. Ted stands out as the episode that did the genre best, and proved the show could thrive in sci-fi territory when it wanted to. A killer robot masquerading as a suburban dad isn't just an eerie concept, it feels like it's straight out of the Twilight Zone, and Buffy managed to make it feel completely at home in the Buffyverse. There were other sci-fi touches across Buffy the Vampire Slayer, such as Warren's inventions in Season 6, the Frankenstein-inspired Adam in Season 4, or the Initiative's military lab and cybernetic experimentation. However, none hit as hard as Ted. Where Adam was a hybrid demon-cyborg monster with a vague motivation and over-the-top design, Ted was simple, streamlined, real. He wasn't built in a lab by a shady government group. He was made in a garage. Yet, somehow, that made the threat feel more grounded, and far more personal. Part of what made Buffy so compelling was its ability to merge genres without losing its identity. Episodes like Ted prove that science fiction didn't have to be flashy or tech-heavy to work in the show's world. It just had to be rooted in